In the suffocating darkness, a pencil trembled. Not from fear, but from the immense pressure of the moment, a silent tremor reflecting the fate of 80 men squeezed into a steel tube beneath the waves. June 19th, 1944. 11:22 hours, the Philippine Sea. A vast, indifferent expanse that was about to become the graveyard of an empire's pride. Lieutenant, junior grade. Jack Kefir's hand shook as he scrawled coordinates into the conning tower log. His words, barely legible, recorded the bearing, marking the precise instant a raw, untested submarine, the USS Cavalla, was poised to unleash an attack that would echo through the annals of naval history. A decisive blow in the brutal, unrelenting Pacific War. Through the periscope, the world outside was a dizzying blur of ocean and sky. Yet Commander Hermann J. Kostler saw only one thing: his target. The massive 25,675-ton Japanese aircraft carrier Shokaku, a venerable ghost of Pearl Harbor, now steaming directly into Cavalla's kill zone. 6 fish away, all hot, straight, and normal. The words, uttered with a cold, professional calm, belied the furnace of anxiety burning within every man. In the coming seconds, these torpedoes would either etch Cavalla's name into immortality or condemn her crew to a crushing retaliation from Shokaku's vigilant escorts. What Kostler couldn't possibly grasp at that moment was the colossal ripple effect his attack would unleash. He wasn't just aiming at a single ship, he was firing a shot that would contribute to the catastrophic annihilation of Japanese naval aviation itself, setting the stage for what would forever be remembered as the Marianas Turkey Shoot. This wasn't a battle dictated by grand strategy sessions in distant war rooms. This was the raw, visceral reality of submarine warfare. Approach angles, torpedo spreads, the split-second decisions of men pushed to the absolute limits of their training, their courage, and their very humanity. To truly understand this moment, we must rewind the clock just 4 months. February 29th, 1944. Leap Day. A fitting start for a boat destined to make such an extraordinary leap in history. The USS Cavalla was commissioned at the Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut. She was one of 73 Gatto-class submarines that would carve their names into the Pacific. But at her birth, she was just another hull, fresh, untested. Her crew, a potent mix of seasoned submariners, grizzled veterans of earlier patrols, and wide-eyed young sailors who had never smelled gunpowder in combat, were a microcosm of America's rapidly mobilized war machine. These weren't professional warriors in the classical sense, but citizen sailors, drawn from every walk of American life. Farmers, factory workers, students, all voluntarily stepping into the claustrophobic, perilous world of undersea warfare. This willingness to serve, this inherent spirit of a free people to rise to the occasion, would prove to be one of America's most potent, yet often overlooked, strategic advantages. Leading this nascent crew was Commander Hermann Joseph Kostler, a Naval Academy graduate from the class of 1934. Kostler was no stranger to the hunt. He had already proven his mettle aboard the USS Guardfish, contributing to the sinking of over 51 tons of Japanese shipping. Now, the weight of command rested squarely on his shoulders. 301 feet of steel, 24 torpedoes, and the hopes of turning the tide in a war that had, for too long, seen American forces on the defensive. Kostler was a man of quiet determination, sharp intellect, and an uncanny intuition for submarine tactics, qualities that would be tested to their absolute breaking point in the coming weeks. The statistics of American submarine production during this period told a story that, had Japanese naval planners known its full scope, would have surely staggered them into despair. By June 1944, American shipyards were launching a new submarine every 17 days. Think about that for a moment. Roughly 2 new, state-of-the-art war machines hitting the water every single month. Each boat was a symphony of industrial might, requiring an astounding 5 million man-hours to construct, meticulously assembled from 75,000 individual components manufactured in 23 different states. This wasn't just building ships. It was orchestrating a national industrial effort on a scale unprecedented in human history. The industrial symphony that produced Cavalla was not an isolated event. It was being replicated continuously across 6 major shipyards, a relentless, churning engine of war. This capacity for mass production, coupled with a constant drive for innovation, contrasted sharply with Japan's increasingly strained industrial base and dwindling resources. Where America could afford to lose a ship and replace it with 2, Japan struggled to replace even 1. Yet, on May 31, 1944, as Cavalla departed Pearl Harbor for her very first war patrol, she was indeed just another untested boat heading into harm's way. The hopes of a nation were riding on her, and thousands of other just another boats, planes, and tanks. Her initial orders were routine enough. Patrol the eastern Philippines. Relieve USS Flying Fish on station at San Bernardino Strait. But routine quickly evaporated in the crucible of war. June 15, 1944. 3 days out from Midway, Cavalla's radio operator, straining against the static and the vast distances, picked up a crackle that signaled an urgent message from Commander Submarines Pacific, Com Sub Pac. Admiral Charles Lockwood's operations staff, working tirelessly and in utmost secrecy, had decoded intelligence that would fundamentally redirect Cavalla's entire mission, transforming her from a patrol boat into a hunter of giants. The Japanese mobile fleet, a formidable force that had been conspicuously absent from major action since the Battle of Santa Cruz in October 1942, had been spotted by the USS Flying Fish. It was moving inexorably toward the Marianas. The implications of this intelligence were staggering, sending a chill down the spines of planners across the Pacific. Operation Forager, the American invasion of Saipan, had begun that very morning. If the Japanese carrier fleet reached the Marianas, it possessed the power to devastate the American invasion force, turning a nascent victory into a bloody disaster. Cavalla was immediately ordered to take position 350 miles east of San Bernardino Strait and intercept. This wasn't a mere patrol. It was a desperate gamble, a race against time, a direct challenge to the might of the Imperial Japanese Navy. The Philippine Sea, however, covered an incomprehensible 1.5 million square miles. Finding a carrier task force in that immense expanse was, as the adage goes, like locating a particular car on all the highways of Texas, but with one critical handicap. Cavalla was submerged, limited to fleeting periscope observations and primitive radar. The sheer scale of the ocean magnified the challenge, turning the hunt into an exercise in patience, luck, and highly specialized skill. June 17, 1944. 1950 hours. After 2 days of empty ocean, a silence punctuated only by the rhythmic hum of machinery and the anxious breathing of the crew, Cavalla's SD radar operator detected a contact at 30,000 yards. The pip on the radar screen was faint, intermittent, appearing and disappearing like a ghost in the electronic noise that plagued early radar systems. It was tantalizing, frustrating, a whisper of a possibility in the vastness. Costler, a man of decisive action, ordered 4 engines ahead full. Cavalla surged forward at 20 knots, her powerful diesel engines roaring to life as she closed the distance, the throbbing vibration of the boat signaling an imminent confrontation. At 22,000 yards, more contacts began to blossom on the radar screen. Multiple ships, arranged in a disciplined formation. What Cavalla had stumbled upon was Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's first mobile fleet, the main striking force of the Imperial Japanese Navy. 9 carriers, 5 battleships, 13 cruisers, and 28 destroyers. The largest concentration of Japanese naval power assembled since the catastrophic Battle of Midway. Executive Officer Lieutenant Commander Robert Risa, a brilliant tactician, calculated the tactical problem with a practiced intensity that belied the danger. The Japanese force was zigzagging at a blistering 19 knots on a course of 290 degrees. To achieve an attack position, Cavalla would need to race ahead on the surface, leveraging her greater speed, then submerge precisely in the enemy's path, hoping that the colossal formation would pass within torpedo range. This was a high-stakes chess game, played on the ocean's surface and in its depths, where every move was fraught with potential disaster. Costler faced an agonizing choice, a moment of profound moral and strategic gravity. Standing orders, a bedrock of naval operations, required him to report the contact immediately. This intelligence could save thousands of American lives, allowing the Fifth Fleet to position its own forces for a decisive counterstrike. But transmitting would inevitably reveal Cavalla's position, broadcasting her presence to an enemy that would respond with swift, brutal force, almost certainly ending any chance of attack. Yet, through the periscope, he saw a tantalizing vulnerability. One of the carriers was recovering aircraft, a dangerous maneuver that left it exposed, distracted, its attention drawn skyward rather than below the waves. This was the submariner's ultimate dilemma: the intelligence imperative versus the tactical opportunity. At 22 hours, Costler made his choice, a decision that spoke volumes about his character and his understanding of the greater strategic picture. He chose duty over glory. Cavalla surfaced, her radio mast slicing through the water, and transmitted a concise yet earth-shattering message. Large enemy task force latitude, 1200, north longitude, 13500, east course, 290, speed 19, many large and small ships. This simple string of words sent into the ether was a gamble, a calculated risk that, if successful, could change the course of the war. The message reached Admiral Raymond Spruance aboard the USS Indianapolis within minutes. The Fifth Fleet commander now knew exactly where the Japanese were, and could he position Task Force 58's 15 carriers accordingly. This intelligence, gleaned at immense risk, would prove absolutely decisive in the coming battle, allowing American forces to prepare for the Japanese onslaught rather than be surprised by it. But transmission came with a price, a cost that Cavalla's crew immediately began to pay. Japanese radio direction finders, ever vigilant, immediately detected the signal. Like hungry sharks sensing blood, 2 destroyers peeled off from the massive formation and charged toward Cavalla's estimated position. Cavalla crash-dived to 300 feet, plunging rapidly into the inky blackness. As the first depth charges exploded above, the submarine's hull groaned under the immense pressure, a terrifying symphony of stressed metal. Each depth charge generated a staggering 23,000 pounds of pressure per square inch at the point of detonation. Close explosions, a submariner's worst nightmare, could crush a submarine like an empty beer can, extinguishing all life within in an instant. For 3 harrowing hours, the destroyers circled above, systematically dropping patterns of depth charges, their chilling detonations echoing through Cavalla's steel skin. Inside Cavalla, the crew counted 42 explosions, each one rattling the boat, breaking light bulbs, and creating small insidious leaks in the hull glands. The temperature inside soared to a brutal 110 degrees S, a hellish environment of sweat and fear. Men stripped to their underwear, breathing shallowly to conserve precious oxygen, every movement a conscious effort, every sound a potential harbinger of doom. This wasn't just physical torment, it was psychological warfare, the constant concussions, the groans of the hull, the certainty that death was circling just feet above them. It was designed to break the will, to crack the very sanity of the men within. Yet they held. Their training, their discipline, and their unspoken bonds of camaraderie forged in the face of absolute terror kept them going. At 1 Hacker on June 18th, the destroyers finally departed, their deadly work seemingly done. Cavalla surfaced into an empty ocean. The task force had escaped, but Costler, a man possessed of a profound tenacity, wasn't ready to give up. He ordered a high-speed pursuit, gambling on the estimated base course, a calculated risk that the carriers would need to launch aircraft at dawn, forcing them to turn into the wind and present a fleeting, vulnerable target. June 19, 1944. 08 hours. After a night of fruitless, anxiety-ridden searching, Cavalla's luck, or perhaps Costler's intuition, finally changed. Aircraft began appearing overhead, dozens of them, streaking east toward the waiting American fleet. The Japanese had launched their morning strike against Task Force 58. This was it. A sound operator reported high-speed screws approaching from the northwest, the unmistakable thrum of powerful warships closing in. Through the periscope, Costler saw them, a Japanese carrier task group racing to recover aircraft. Target angle 90 degrees starboard, range 5,000 yards and closing, speed 24 knots, 3 carriers visible. The nearest one, a massive silhouette with a distinctive island structure. Lieutenant David McClung, the recognition officer, frantically checked his identification cards, his voice tight with anticipation. "That's Shokaku, Captain. Pearl Harbor veteran. 29,000 tons displacement." What followed was a masterclass in submarine approach tactics, a testament to years of training and the seamless coordination of Cavalla's crew. Costler ordered Cavalla to periscope depth, a delicate balancing act between the need to remain hidden from watchful eyes and the imperative to maintain visual contact with the target. Every 60 seconds, he would raise the periscope for a mere 3-second observation, a fleeting glimpse, just enough to update the target's bearing and range. Any longer, and the telltale feather of a periscope wake could be spotted, dooming them all. The approach party worked with mechanical precision, a silent ballet of highly trained individuals. The Torpedo Data Computer, or TDC, a marvel of analog computing, clicked and whirred, its gears meticulously turning as operators inputted the target's course, speed, and range. The TDC was a technological marvel, an almost sentient machine for its time, capable of solving complex trigonometric equations in real time, accounting for the submarine's motion, the target's motion, and the torpedo's speed. Imagine a device the size of a small desk, with intricate gears, cams, and levers, doing calculations that would have required entire teams of mathematicians just a few years prior. It was a testament to American ingenuity, a symbol of the technological edge that would prove so vital in the Pacific. The tension in the conning tower was palpable, a suffocating blanket of dread and determination. Every man knew they were approaching one of Japan's most powerful warships, protected by destroyers whose sole, terrifying purpose was to kill submarines. One mistake, one glint of a periscope spotted, one torpedo wake seen too soon, and Cavalla would join the 52 American submarines already lost in the vast, unforgiving Pacific War. Their fate hung by a thread, contingent on perfect execution and a sliver of luck. 11 sea hours. Shokaku, utterly unaware of the silent predator stalking her beneath the waves, turned into the wind to recover aircraft. This maneuver, a necessity for carrier operations, presented her broadside to Cavalla. The carrier was now at 200 yards, point-blank range for a torpedo attack. Through the periscope, Kostler could even make out Japanese pilots climbing out of their aircraft on the flight deck, oblivious to the impending doom. But as Cavalla prepared to fire, disaster nearly struck. A Japanese destroyer, later identified as Urakazi, suddenly appeared on an attack course. It had either spotted Cavalla's periscope or perhaps the subtle opening of her torpedo tube doors. Kostler had maybe 10 seconds to make a decision, a choice that could mean the difference between victory and oblivion. Dive and lose the shot, allowing Shokaku to escape, or fire and risk getting rammed, crushing the submarine and its crew. He made his choice, a primal, instinctive declaration of Fire 1. At precisely 8-second intervals, 6 Mark 14 torpedoes surged out of Cavalla's forward tubes. 3 were standard Mark 14s, with magnetic exploders designed to detonate beneath the keel, creating a devastating, back-breaking effect. 3 were Mark 23s with contact exploders, set to explode on impact. Each torpedo was a masterpiece of destructive engineering, weighing 3,280 pounds, carrying 668 pounds of highly potent Torpex explosive, and traveling at a blistering 46 knots, roughly 53 miles per hour. These were not the faulty torpedoes that had plagued American submariners in the early years of the war. These were debugged, refined weapons, finally capable of fulfilling their deadly promise. 11:22 hours. Through the periscope, Kostler watched, his heart pounding as his torpedoes raced toward Shokaku. The first torpedo passed ahead of the bow, a near miss that tightened the knot of tension in the conning tower. Then a thunderous explosion. The second torpedo struck just forward of the island structure. Another. The third hit amidships. A fourth impacted near the stern. The fifth and sixth passed astern, their mission complete. On Shokaku's bridge, Captain Matsubara Hiroshi had just ordered evasive action when the lookout's desperate warning came. Torpedo starboard! It was too late. The first impact had already sealed the carrier's fate. The initial torpedo, striking at frame 103, ruptured aviation fuel tanks, igniting an immediate and catastrophic fire. The second, hitting at frame 144, destroyed the forward engine room and ripped a gaping hole across 3 compartments. The third, impacting at frame 201, obliterated the aft aviation fuel system and triggered secondary fires that raged throughout the hangar deck. A vast space now filled with highly volatile fuel vapors. The scale of the damage was immense, almost beyond belief. On Cavalla, there was no time for celebration, no moment to savor the triumph. The destroyer Urakazi, having spotted Cavalla's periscope or the telltale splash of her torpedoes, was charging their position, already within 1,000 yards. Kostler, clear-headed in the face of mortal danger, ordered an emergency dive to 400 feet, plunging Cavalla beyond her rated test depth of 300 feet. It was a desperate measure, pushing the submarine's hull to its structural limits, risking catastrophic implosion. As Cavalla plunged toward the terrifying depths, her crew could hear the chilling, undeniable sounds of shokaku dying above them. The carrier's bulkheads groaned and collapsed. Ammunition magazines exploded with earth-shattering force, and steam lines ruptured with screaming hisses that carried through the water, a symphony of destruction. It was the sound of a ship breaking apart, of lives being lost, a sound that would haunt these men for the rest of their days. The depth charging began immediately, a brutal, relentless assault. Urakazi and 2 other destroyers converged, dropping patterns of Type 95 depth charges around Cavalla's estimated position. In the next 3 hours, they would unleash a hellish barrage of 106 depth charges, each one containing 220 pounds of Type 88 explosive. These were not random drops. These were calculated, lethal attacks designed to obliterate the submarine, to grind it into scrap metal and extinguish every life within. Inside Cavalla, conditions deteriorated rapidly, morphing into a suffocating nightmare. The air conditioning had been secured to reduce noise, the silence of its cessation replaced by the deafening explosions outside. The temperature climbed to a scorching 120 gragers, and humidity reached 100%, turning the air into a thick, oppressive soup. Men fainted from heat exhaustion, their bodies pushed beyond endurance. Carbon dioxide levels rose dangerously as the crew, desperately trying to conserve precious oxygen, forced themselves to breathe shallowly. Every breath was a struggle, every moment a battle against the environment and the relentless enemy above. At 11:45, a close explosion ruptured a seal in the forward torpedo room, starting a leak that would eventually flood the compartment with 2,000 gallons of icy seawater. At 12:10, another near miss knocked out the sound gear, leaving Cavalla blind, unable to detect the destroyers hunting them. The submarine, now deaf and largely relying on the raw courage and experience of its crew, became a submerged sardine can awaiting its fate. At 12:30, the submarine's ventilation supply trunk flooded, filling with 400 gallons of seawater that had to be pumped out by hand. The crew, in the suffocating 120-degree heat, formed a grim bucket brigade, passing buckets of water from hand to hand in the narrow, cramped passageways, a desperate struggle against the encroaching ocean. This was heroism, not of the dramatic, cinematic kind, but of grinding, back-breaking labor under impossible conditions. Then, at 14:10, 2 hours and 48 minutes after Cavalla's torpedoes had found their mark, the crew heard a sound that would haunt them forever. 4 massive, concussive explosions from the direction of Shokaku. They were hearing Shokaku's death throes. The carrier's aviation fuel vapor, having built up between decks despite frantic damage control efforts to ventilate the spaces, had finally reached critical levels. A spark, possibly from damaged electrical equipment or a rogue fire, ignited the vapor cloud. The explosion was catastrophic, ripping through the ship with unimaginable force. Shokaku's flight deck buckled upward, her massive hull splitting along the keel. The forward elevator was blown completely off the ship, rising a horrifying 200 feet into the air before crashing back into the sea. The once proud carrier, a symbol of Imperial Japanese naval power, broke in half and sank in less than 4 minutes. Above Cavalla, as she cowered at 400 feet, one of the Pacific War's great tragedies was unfolding. Of Shokaku's crew of 660 officers and men, only 570 would survive. Lost were 887 members of the ship's company and 376 members of Air Group 601, including some of Japan's most experienced and irreplaceable naval aviators. Among the dead was Commander Takahashi Kakuichi, the revered leader of Air Group 601, a man who had led strikes at Pearl Harbor, Ceylon, and Santa Cruz. His loss, and the loss of his veteran pilots, represented damage to Japanese naval aviation from which it would never, ever recover. It was not just equipment lost, it was institutional knowledge, experience, and the very spirit of their air arm. Captain Matsubara, Shokaku's commander, survived, pulled from the water after being washed overboard when Shokaku capsized. In the stoic Japanese tradition, he had attempted to go down with his ship, but was saved against his will by his loyal crew. He would never command another vessel, spending the rest of the war in shore assignments, a haunted man tormented by the loss of his ship and his men. The personal cost of this battle was immense, echoing far beyond the immediate explosions. Back aboard Cavalla, the depth charging finally ended at 1430. The submarine had endured 106 depth charges over 3 hours and 6 minutes, a testament to her robust construction and the sheer resilience of her crew. Costler, ever cautious, waited another hour before ordering Cavalla up to periscope depth. The sea was empty. Nothing but oil slicks and debris, the grim detritus of a titanic struggle. In the distance, smoke columns marked where Shokaku had been. Japanese destroyers were picking up survivors, too focused on rescue operations to continue hunting the submarine that had delivered such a devastating blow. At 19 knots, Cavalla surfaced into the gathering dusk. The crew emerged onto the deck, gasping in the fresh, clean air after 9 hours submerged in their metal coffin. Many collapsed from sheer exhaustion, their bodies wrung out, their nerves frayed. The submarine's hull bore the scars of her ordeal, dents from near misses, paint stripped by blast pressure, and dozens of small leaks that would require immediate emergency repairs. Costler, with characteristic understatement, transmitted his report to Pearl Harbor. Hit Shokaku-class carrier with 3 out of 6 torpedoes. Received 105 depth charges during 3-hour period. Heard 4 terrific explosions in direction of Target 2 and 1 at 2 hours after attack. Believe that baby sank. That simple phrase, believe that baby sank, carried the weight of an extraordinary victory. What Cavalla's crew didn't yet know was that they had contributed to one of the most decisive naval victories in history, a battle that would fundamentally alter the course of the Pacific War. While they were attacking Shokaku, another American submarine, the USS Albacore, had torpedoed the carrier Taiho, Ozawa's flagship. Though Taiho took only 1 torpedo hit, a single critical flaw in her design and notoriously poor Japanese damage control led to a massive vapor explosion that sank her with the loss of 1,650 officers and men. It was a horrific double blow. In the air, the Marianas Turkey Shoot was reaching its brutal climax. American F-6F Hellcat fighters, guided by superior radar and tactics, flown by highly trained pilots, soared through the skies. They shot down an astounding 315 Japanese aircraft while losing only 23 of their own. In total, the Japanese lost 445 carrier aircraft, along with their irreplaceable pilots. This wasn't just a lopsided victory. It was an aerial massacre. Japan had begun the war with 3,000 highly trained naval aviators, the elite of their armed forces. By June 19, 1944, fewer than 500 remained. The aircraft, as devastating as their loss was, could eventually be replaced. Japan would build 24 45 carrier aircraft throughout the war. But the pilots. In 1944, they could not. Training a carrier pilot required a minimum of 700 flight hours, a rigorous, time-consuming process. Japan no longer had the fuel, the time, or the instructors to replicate such a force. This was the true crippling blow, a strategic injury from which the Imperial Japanese Navy would never recover. Cavalla's successful attack represented more than just a tactical victory. It showcased a profound revolution in American submarine warfare. The Mark 14 torpedo, a weapon that had caused immense frustration and heartbreak in the early war years due to its persistent failures, had finally been debugged. The magnetic exploder problems, which often caused the torpedoes to pass harmlessly under targets, had been identified and fixed. The depth settings, frequently incorrect, had been corrected. Contact exploders had been redesigned for reliability. This wasn't just a technological fix, it was a testament to American scientific and industrial adaptability, the ability to learn from mistakes and relentlessly innovate under pressure. The Torpedo Data Computer, TDC, which had calculated Cavalla's precise firing solution, was a masterpiece of analog computing, performing real-time trigonometric calculations that would have required teams of mathematicians just years before. To appreciate its genius, imagine a mechanical calculator that could simultaneously track multiple moving objects, predict their intersection points, and adjust for variables like submarine speed, target speed, and torpedo speed, all while under combat conditions. Each submarine carried 2 TDCs for redundancy, representing $60,000 worth of precision engineering. In 1944, the cost of 12 average American homes. This commitment to advanced technology and the ability to mass produce it was a game changer. American industrial capacity had produced torpedoes in staggering quantities. By June 1944, the Newport Torpedo Station was churning out 300 Mark 14 torpedoes monthly. Each torpedo required 2,000 man-hours to manufacture, involving 1,500 individual parts manufactured to incredibly tight tolerances of 0.001 inches. This wasn't just about making things. It was about making precise things, reliably, at scale, which again Japan struggled to match. The presence of Cavalla and other American submarines in exactly the right positions to intercept the Japanese fleet was no accident. It was the direct result of a triumph of intelligence. American code breakers had been reading Japanese naval messages since 1942. The JN-25 code system, despite Japanese confidence in its security, had been systematically penetrated. Commander Joseph Rochefort's brilliant team at Station Hypo in Pearl Harbor could decode and translate Japanese fleet messages within hours of transmission. They knew Ozawa's planned route, his fuel status, even the names of his ship captains. This intelligence, distributed to submarine commanders as ultra messages, positioned American submarines along Japanese transit routes with deadly, almost surgical precision. The Japanese never suspected their codes were compromised. Post-war interrogations revealed they attributed American submarine success to superior radar and lucky positioning, a convenient, if ultimately fatal, delusion. The truth that Americans were reading their most secret communications remained classified until the 1970s, a testament to the enduring power of intelligence secrecy. By the time Cavalla sank Shokaku, American submarines had evolved into the most effective naval weapon in the Pacific. The statistics were staggering. 288 submarines would serve in the Pacific War. They would sink 318 Japanese vessels totaling 5.3 million tons, accounting for an astonishing 55% of all Japanese losses. This wasn't just naval combat, it was an economic strangulation. The human cost, however, was severe. 52 American submarines were lost, taking with them 506 officers and men, a 22% casualty rate, the highest of any American service branch. Their sacrifice, however, had a decisive impact. Japan, an island nation utterly dependent on imports for its very survival, was slowly, inexorably strangled by submarine warfare. Vice Admiral Takagi Soichi, a high-ranking Japanese naval officer, admitted post-war, "The American submarine campaign was the single most decisive factor in our defeat. We could replace ships. We could find new sources of oil. We could train more sailors, but we could not protect our merchant fleet from submarines. They destroyed our ability to wage war." This stark admission underscores the strategic genius of the American submarine campaign. It targeted the very lifelines of the Japanese Empire. July 1, 1944. After 11 more days of fruitless patrol, Cavalla received orders to proceed to Saipan. As the submarine approached the embattled island, her crew bore witness to the massive, awe-inspiring scale of American operations. Kostler, a man of few words, wrote in his patrol report, "The sight was beyond description. Every type of ship in the Navy appeared to be present. Battleships bombarding the island, carriers launching strikes, transports unloading supplies, smoke and explosions covered half the island." This was American power unleashed, an industrial and military might that no other nation could hope to match. Cavalla was escorted into port by the USS Philip, a destroyer whose crew lined the rails to cheer the submarine that had sunk Shokaku. Word of Cavalla's success had spread like wildfire throughout the fleet. As she tied up to the submarine tender USS Holland, sailors from other boats came to see the submarine that had killed a Pearl Harbor attacker, a tangible symbol of retribution and victory. August 3, 1944. Cavalla arrived at Majuro Atoll for official debriefing. Vice Admiral Charles Lockwood, the formidable Commander Submarine Force Pacific, personally came aboard to congratulate the crew, an honor reserved for the most extraordinary achievements. The submarine would receive a Presidential Unit citation for her first patrol, an accolade reserved for extraordinary heroism in action. In Japan, the devastating loss of Shokaku was initially hidden from the public. The Imperial Navy, desperate to maintain morale and avoid a catastrophic blow to national confidence, listed her as damaged and under repair until October 1944, when her loss was quietly acknowledged. The psychological impact on the Navy, however, was profound and immediate. Shokaku had seemed invincible, surviving severe damage at Coral Sea and Santa Cruz that would have sunk lesser ships. She was a veteran, a survivor, a symbol of Japanese tenacity. Commander Fuchida Mitsuo, who had famously led the Pearl Harbor attack from the carrier Akagi, wrote after the war, "When we learned Shokaku was gone, we knew the war was lost. She was more than a ship. She was a symbol of our naval power. Her loss and Taiho's in a single day broke the spirit of the carrier force." This candid assessment highlights the psychological blow, the realization that their grand strategy was crumbling. The technical failure was equally devastating. Japanese damage control, once considered superior by some, had failed catastrophically. The aviation fuel vapor explosion that destroyed Shokaku could have been prevented with proper ventilation procedures. American carriers, though they suffered similar torpedo damage, often survived through superior damage control, quickly isolating fires, venting explosive fumes, and compartmentalizing damage. This was a critical lesson America had learned through grim experience and continuous improvement. Captain Ome Toshikazu, Ozawa's chief of staff, testified, "We learned the wrong lessons from our early victories. We thought spirit and training could overcome material disadvantages. But you cannot fight radar with courage. You cannot stop torpedoes with determination. The Americans had built a war machine we could not match." His words articulated a painful truth for the Japanese military. Their initial success had blinded them to the fundamental industrial and technological disparities. The sinking of Shokaku demonstrated American technological advantages that went far beyond submarines and torpedoes. The SJ surface search radar on Cavalla could detect ships at 15 miles in darkness or fog, giving American submarines an invaluable edge in tracking enemy movements. Japanese radar, installed on only a few ships, had a maximum range of 8 miles and frequently malfunctioned, leaving their fleets vulnerable. American communications were equally superior. Cavalla's radio could reach Pearl Harbor from anywhere in the Pacific using high-frequency bands and sophisticated encryption. Japanese submarines often had to surface near island bases to relay messages, dangerously exposing themselves to attack. The preservation systems on American submarines represented another crucial, often overlooked, advantage. Cavalla's air conditioning not only provided crew comfort, an important factor in sustained morale and effectiveness, but also prevented electrical systems from corroding in the tropical humidity, reducing equipment failures. Her water distillation plant produced 1,000 gallons of fresh water daily, a critical amenity for long patrols. Japanese submarines, lacking these systems, suffered from rampant equipment failures and severe crew health problems on extended patrols, directly impacting their operational efficiency and combat readiness. The men who served on Cavalla were representative of American submarine crews, volunteers, all intensively trained and remarkably young. The average age was just 23. Most had never been to sea before the war, yet they operated one of the most complex weapon systems ever created with remarkable skill and precision. Their training was extraordinary, designed for maximum resilience. Each crew member was cross-trained in multiple specialties. An electrician could operate the diving planes. A torpedo man could run the diesel engines. This redundancy meant that battle casualties, while tragic, rarely mission-killed an American submarine, allowing them to continue the fight even with significant losses. Morale was maintained through amenities unthinkable on other warships. Cavalla had an ice cream machine, washing machines, and individual bunks for most crew members. The food was often the best in the Navy. Steaks, fresh vegetables when available, and bread baked daily. These seeming luxuries had a direct military purpose, maintaining crew effectiveness and mental acuity on arduous 60-day patrols, ensuring that these young men could perform at their peak when it mattered most. The destruction of Shokaku and Taiho triggered cascading failures throughout Japanese naval aviation. Air Group 601, split between the two carriers, lost 80% of its aircraft and pilots. These were not just numerical losses, they were the loss of irreplaceable veterans, the men who could have trained the next generation of aviators. The Japanese pilot training program, already strained by material shortages and a prolonged war, collapsed completely after the Philippine Sea battle. Before the war, Japanese naval aviators received an impressive 700 hours of flight training, producing highly skilled pilots. By late 1944, new pilots received less than 100 hours of training, often unable to perform even basic carrier operations, much less engage in complex combat maneuvers. They were, in essence, sent to their deaths with insufficient preparation. American pilot training, by contrast, was expanding exponentially. By June 1944, the United States was training 100,000 pilots annually, each receiving 600 hours of flight time before deployment. The training infrastructure, 139 air stations, 40,000 training aircraft, 100,000 instructors, represented industrial mobilization on an unprecedented scale. This disparity in pilot quality and quantity was perhaps the single most decisive factor in the air war, the Battle of the Philippine Sea, enabled by Cavalla's intelligence gathering and punctuated by her sinking of Shokaku, effectively ended Japanese carrier aviation as an offensive force. The Imperial Navy would never again launch a major carrier strike against American forces. Admiral Toyoda Soemu, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, recognized the implications immediately. The loss of our air groups means the loss of the war. We can build new carriers, but we cannot create experienced pilots. This profound realization marked the beginning of the end for Japan. Japan had lost 476 carrier aircraft and 445 pilots in just 2 days. The United States had lost 130 aircraft and 76 pilots, a significant loss, but one that America could absorb and quickly replace. America was producing 500 new naval aircraft weekly and training 2,000 new naval aviators monthly. Japan was producing 100 aircraft weekly and training a mere 200 pilots monthly, most of whom would never survive their first combat mission. The chasm in capabilities was simply too vast to bridge. Cavalla's success inspired intensified submarine operations. By July 1944, 140 American submarines were operating in the Pacific, organized into devastating wolf packs that systematically decimated Japanese shipping. The Japanese merchant fleet, which had totaled 6.4 million tons in December 1941, had been reduced to a mere 2.8 million tons. Japan required 3 million tons of shipping to maintain a minimal civilian economy, and military operations required another 3 million tons. With less than 3 million tons total available, both the economy and the military were slowly starving. Rice imports plummeted from 1.4 million tons in 1941 to 200,000 tons in 1944. Oil imports dropped from 5 million tons to a paltry 600,000 tons, crippling their war machine. By late 1944, Japanese destroyers were making desperate, suicidal runs from Singapore to Japan, carrying drums of aviation fuel on their decks because tankers could no longer survive the gauntlet of American submarines. This was the true, brutal impact of the submarine campaign. Not just sinking warships, but cutting off the very arteries of an empire. The success of submarines like Cavalla also drove continuous innovation, a relentless cycle of improvement. The Mark 18 electric torpedo, introduced in late 1944, left no wake for destroyers to track, making evasion much harder. The Mark 27 homing torpedo, a truly revolutionary weapon, could chase enemy ships acoustically, adding another layer of terror for Japanese mariners. Radar technology advanced rapidly. The SJ radar that had helped Cavalla find the Japanese fleet was quickly replaced by the ST radar, with twice the range and resolution, offering even greater situational awareness. By war's end, American submarines had radar capabilities exceeding those of most surface ships, transforming them from blind hunters into keen-eyed predators. Communication security also reached new heights. The ECM Mark II cipher machine on Cavalla encoded messages with 150 million possible combinations, a level of encryption that proved impenetrable. Japanese code breakers never decrypted a single American submarine operational message during the entire war, a stark contrast to the American success with JN-25. This asymmetry in intelligence and communication was a silent, yet powerful, force multiplier. Cavalla would go on to complete 5 more war patrols after sinking Shokaku, each demonstrating growing American dominance. On her 3rd patrol, she sank the destroyer Shimotsuki on November 25, 1944, killing the commander of Destroyer Squadron 31 and his entire staff, another critical loss of experienced leadership. On January 5, 1945, she destroyed 2 net tenders in a daring night surface attack. By 1945, Cavalla and her sisters operated with impunity in the Sea of Japan itself, a body of water previously considered a Japanese lake, safe from enemy incursions. They surfaced in daylight, almost defiantly, challenging any Japanese vessel to come out and fight. Few did. The statistics of Cavalla's war were impressive, but not unique. 6 war patrols, 34,180 tons of shipping sunk, and, remarkably, 0 crew members lost to enemy action. This record, multiplied across nearly 300 submarines, spelled inevitable doom for the Japanese Empire. August 15, 1945. Cavalla was on lifeguard duty off Japan when Emperor Hirohito's surrender broadcast was transmitted, signaling the end of the war. Minutes later, as if in denial of reality, a lone Japanese aircraft attacked the submarine, dropping 2 bombs that missed by a mere 100 yards. It was the last attack by Japanese forces on an American submarine, a final desperate gasp of a defeated nation. September 2, 1945. Cavalla entered Tokyo Bay for the surrender ceremony, a powerful symbol of victory. From her deck, crew members could see the USS Missouri, where General MacArthur was accepting Japan's formal capitulation. Among the Allied fleet, 12 American carriers rode majestically at anchor, none of them seriously damaged during the war. Of Japan's 25 fleet and light carriers, 20 had been sunk, including the proud Shokaku. Commander Kostler, now promoted to captain, stood on Cavalla's bridge, watching the historic ceremony unfold. He would later write, "We started this war with obsolete torpedoes and peacetime training. We ended it as the most effective naval force in history. Every man who served in submarines can be proud that we strangled an empire." His words encapsulate the quiet, grim pride of men who performed an essential, brutal duty. The numbers, undeniably, told the story of submarine warfare's decisive impact. Japanese losses to U.S. submarines: 314 vessels sunk, 5.3 million tons of shipping destroyed. 8 battleships sunk or damaged, 11 aircraft carriers sunk, 30 cruisers sunk or damaged, 127 destroyers and escorts sunk. An incredible 60% of the Japanese merchant marine annihilated. American submarine losses: 52 submarines lost, 3,506 officers and men killed, a 22% casualty rate, 7 submarines lost to operational accidents, 45 lost to enemy action. Cavalla's individual record: 6 war patrols, 4 vessels sunk, 3,480 tons destroyed, 1 presidential unit citation, 4 battle stars, and 0 crew casualties from enemy action. A remarkable testament to her crew's skill and fortune. Behind these cold statistics lay human tragedy on an enormous scale. The 272 men who died on Shokaku left behind families who would never truly know their fate. Japanese naval records were largely destroyed in bombing raids, leaving only partial crew lists. Many families received only a terse notification. Died for the Emperor in the Southern Seas. A hollow closure for an unimaginable loss. American submariners who survived carried their own profound psychological scars. The sounds of dying ships, the knowledge that hundreds of enemies were drowning above them, the constant existential fear of depth charging. These memories haunted veterans for decades. Post-traumatic stress disorder, a condition not recognized or treated during the war, afflicted unknown thousands, a silent casualty of the deep. December 30th, 1969. After 25 years of distinguished service, including a conversion to a hunter-killer submarine during the Cold War, Cavalla was decommissioned. Rather than succumbing to the scrapyard, the Navy transferred her to the Texas Submarine Veterans of World War II, a fitting tribute to her legacy. Today, Cavalla rests proudly at Seawolf Park in Galveston, Texas, preserved as a memorial and museum. Visitors can walk through the very same compartments where Costler and his crew made history. The torpedo room where the weapons that killed Shokaku were loaded. The conning tower where the approach was calculated with surgical precision. The control room where Cavalla dove to escape destruction. This isn't just a ship. It's a living artifact, a portal to a critical moment in time. The preservation required extraordinary effort. Volunteers, many of them submarine veterans themselves, spent 10,000 hours painstakingly restoring Cavalla to her 1944 configuration. A labor of love and remembrance. Original equipment was located and reinstalled. The very torpedo data computer that calculated the firing solution against Shokaku, found decades later in a Navy warehouse, was rebuilt to working condition, its intricate gears and levers a testament to human ingenuity. For decades after the war, Cavalla veterans held annual reunions, gathering to remember shipmates, share stories, and maintain the unbreakable bonds forged in combat. As age claimed more veterans each year, the reunions grew smaller but more poignant, each gathering a precious communion of survivors. At the 1994 reunion, marking the 50th anniversary of sinking Shokaku, only 47 of Cavalla's original 80-man crew remained alive. Commander Costler, by then 82 and retired as a rear admiral, delivered the keynote address, his words imbued with the wisdom of a life lived. We were young men given an impossible task: find and sink the enemy fleet with one small submarine. We succeeded through training, courage, and luck. But we must remember that our enemies were also brave men doing their duty. We honor our victory without celebrating their deaths. In a remarkable gesture of reconciliation, the reunion committee even invited Japanese survivors to attend. The meeting was emotional, deeply moving. Former enemies, now old men, sharing memories of a day that had forever changed both their lives, finding common ground in the shared humanity of combat. Naval historians consider the sinking of Shokaku one of the most significant submarine attacks of World War II. The elimination of a Pearl Harbor veteran carried immense symbolic importance, but the tactical impact was even greater. Shokaku's air group represented irreplaceable expertise that could have trained new pilots and prolonged Japanese resistance, buying them precious time. Dr. Samuel Eliot Morrison, the Navy's official historian, wrote, "Cavalla's sinking of Shokaku was perfectly timed and executed. Coming during the Philippine Sea Battle, it contributed to the virtual annihilation of Japanese carrier aviation." He concluded, "The submarine force, more than any other element, strangled Japan into submission." Japanese historians agree. Professor Tanaka Hiroaki of the Japanese Defense University concluded, "The loss of Shokaku and Taiho in one day broke the backbone of our carrier force. Not just the ships, but the experienced crews, the maintenance specialists, the institutional knowledge. Cavalla's torpedoes destroyed more than a ship. They destroyed a capability we could never rebuild." The lesson of Shokaku's destruction resonates profoundly in modern naval planning. Aircraft carriers, despite their immense power and technological sophistication, remain vulnerable to submarine attack. The vulnerability of capital ships to asymmetric threats, first vividly demonstrated by submarines like Cavalla, continues to shape naval doctrine. Modern carriers employ multiple escorts specifically tasked with anti-submarine warfare. Helicopters with dipping sonar patrol continuously. Nuclear attack submarines scout ahead of carrier groups, acting as silent guardians. Yet, submarine technology advances just as rapidly as anti-submarine warfare. The cat-and-mouse game that began with Cavalla and Shokaku continues, unseen and unheard, beneath the world's oceans. A silent, perpetual struggle for naval supremacy. On July 1, 1988, Rear Admiral Hermann J. Kostler died at the age of 76, surrounded by family at his home in Virginia. His final public statement, delivered at the 1987 Cavalla reunion, captured the profound essence of the submarine war. "We did what had to be done. We sank ships and killed men because our nation asked it of us. We took no pleasure in death, but we took pride in duty performed. Shokaku was our enemy, but her crew were sailors like us, brave men serving their country. We defeated them not because we were better men, but because we had better tools and used them well. The lesson of our war is not that submarines are powerful, though they are. It's not that technology wins wars, though it helps. The lesson is that free peoples, when threatened, can mobilize resources and determination that authoritarian regimes cannot match. We didn't just outproduce our enemies. We outthought them, out-innovated them, and ultimately outlasted them. Today, Cavalla sits in Galveston, a silent, powerful teacher for new generations, showing them what was done and why. When young people walk through her cramped compartments, touch the instruments of war, and read the names of those who served, they understand that ordinary Americans, farmers, factory workers, students, came together to operate these complex machines and win an impossible war. That, Kostler believed, was the real victory. Not the sinking of one ship, however significant, but the enduring proof that democracy, when tested, prevails. In the USS Cavalla Museum in Galveston, a plaque lists the 52 American submarines lost in World War II, boats that remain on eternal patrol. Their crews, totaling 3,506 officers and men, made the ultimate sacrifice in the very same waters where Cavalla triumphed. Visitors to Cavalla can see the battle flag that flew when she sank Shokaku, adorned with 6 small Japanese flags, each representing a confirmed kill. But perhaps more moving is the submarine's memorial room, where photographs of every American submarine lost in the war serve as a poignant reminder that victory, however glorious, always came at a terrible, incalculable cost. The story of USS Cavalla and the sinking of Shokaku ultimately transcends national boundaries and wartime enmities. It demonstrates how technological innovation, industrial mobilization on an unimaginable scale, and the unwavering courage of ordinary human beings can combine to achieve the seemingly impossible. A single submarine, manned by 80 young Americans, destroyed one of the most powerful warships in the Japanese Navy and contributed decisively to ending the Pacific War. As the last veterans of World War II pass into history, vessels like Cavalla become our tangible links to their sacrifice and achievement. Walking through her narrow passages, touching the instruments of war, reading the names of those who served. These experiences connect us to a time when ordinary people accomplished truly extraordinary things. USS Cavalla's successful attack on June 19, 1944, stands as a testament to American submarine warfare's decisive contribution to victory in the Pacific. The submarine that emerged from Electric Boat Company's shipyard as just another fleet boat became a powerful symbol of how technology, rigorous training, and sheer courage could overcome a determined enemy defending their homeland. The destruction of Shokaku was not just a tactical victory or a strategic success. It was the physical manifestation of American industrial supremacy, technological innovation, and the indomitable skill of citizen sailors who mastered complex weapons to defeat totalitarian aggression. In the end, that may be the most important lesson from that fateful day in June 1944, when USS Cavalla's torpedoes found their mark and changed the course of history forever.